Welcome to our African Adventure celebration. We just want to celebrate the last 15 years of the work CWM has done here with African Adventure. I'm sure this video will fill you with mixed emotions. There'll be some of us that will be saying goodbye and will be grieving it. But we want to focus on the good times and the celebrating the thousands of young people that have come through here and the hundreds of school staff that have encountered Jesus' love through African Adventure. Of course, it wouldn't have happened without the place behind us. And we want to say a massive thank you to the blessing and the privilege it's been for us to use Sizewell Hall. So thank you.
We've had an amazing group of volunteers that have helped us throughout the years of African Adventure. We just wanted to acknowledge that so many of them are part of this video today, but not all of them could have been here. And so we just wanted to send out an extra thank you to anybody who has made an impact on African Adventure, how small or big. We're going to have a range of things that we're offering up today, some interviews, some sung worship at the end, and just a way of celebrating everything that has gone on here.
So please enjoy the video.
So let's start things off with an interview with Simon and Dave Pepper. Dave Pepper was the CEO of CYM, so he's going to give us an insight into what African Adventure was like at the beginning.
It's really great to welcome Dave Pepper. Dave, thank you so much for being with us. We're having this occasion to celebrate all that African Adventure was. And of course, you were really pivotal in that. You're CEO of CYM from 1998 through to 2008. And of course, African Adventure came about and was formed and built and started running during that time. So we really appreciate you giving us time. You're now working as the CEO over at the Mix in Stowmarket, so still doing lots of stuff with young people, which is really exciting to know. We're just going to have a bit of a conversation about African Adventure in those really early days and perhaps share some of your memories and thoughts of that time. So thank you for doing this.
That's a pleasure.
Can you start us with how on earth did this concept come about? You know, building a mock African village in the forest at Sizewell. Where did that come from? You know, what was the seed for that idea?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like the obvious thing to do, does it? Up in good old Sizewell. So I think where it started was a recognition that a lot of our primary schools work, whilst it was excellent, was fleeting. We didn't actually have a chance to build relationships with children. And so we began to ask the questions, how can we further that and deepen relationships that we might build and not just be doing a 5-minute assembly once a term? What does it look like to enhance those relationships? And of course, we were already doing quite a lot at Sizewell and didn't immediately make the connection, but began to think about residential opportunities. And so I remember really clearly touring to a number of places to look at what other people were doing and to look at opportunities to create something residential. And there was one place, in my memory, it was somewhere near Beccles, and Alan Fisher and I drove there. And it was somebody who was doing some primary schools work. It wasn't residential, but a class would come along and essentially sit in what was not much more than a garden shed, and this person would tell them stories. That was just a part of the offering. And as we drove home from that, I was asking myself the question, what story can we tell? What story can we tell? And I'd been working in Africa when I was in my early 20s and thought there's something there around a whole story and a theme that we can place in Africa, which would tick so many boxes for our work with primary schools as far as the curriculum is concerned, but would also give us a springboard to talk about the gospel. And that was really the birth of it, that car journey and those visits to places that were already doing stuff, but it wasn't the same, but it sowed a seed, which became an idea.
That's really great to hear. And you mentioned Alan there. I think even in my first week when I joined CYM, Alan turned up and met me and interviewed me for something. He was clearly a key person in that. What was his sort of involvement at the time? Was he chair of trustees or something like that?
So Alan wasn't chair of trustees, but he was a very engaged trustee. And I think he was one of the key players in terms of making it make financial sense. He loved to do spreadsheets and did a fabulous job of helping us to see how we could afford it and how we could drive it forward and create a good business model for it.
That's great. So you've got back from that car journey. It's about telling the story. Africa's influenced that. How did we then jump to a point where schools started coming? Because there's a huge gap there, isn't there, of all of the stuff you had to do to create this. What went into, was that a 2-3 year process?
Oh goodness, I'm not sure, if I'm honest, what the time scale was, but it was fairly tight actually. I think not much more than a year. And it was about great people getting on board. So we had the idea, we then had to find the venue for it. And that took us a while. We looked at a few different places and then landed at Sizewell Hall. And that was based on existing relationship. We did loads of stuff at Sizewell Hall with our young people. And when we had conversations that began to shape something significant and began to give us some real clarity about what that could be, we were able to bring Sizewell Hall on board with that. And then it was around finding people with the right skill sets. So there was a guy called John Mellon. John had worked in Africa. He had the absolutely the right skill set to project manage it. And had time and was willing, and in fact more than willing, he was absolutely passionate about it. Now, it's God's provision, don't you? When somebody puts their hand up and says, "Yeah, I can do that. I've lived in Africa. I have the right skill set, and I'm available now." So he was pivotal in us being able to deliver it quickly. But there were various other people as well. In terms of the curriculum development, we had Ben Whale on the staff at the time. Ben had been a primary school teacher. As we shaped the program, he could work with local teachers and say what boxes can we tick for the curriculum. And so the facility was being developed alongside the detail of the program. And then we worked with an external advisor whose name I can't quite remember. I can picture him very clearly, a bearded giant, who brought lots of the ideas, like the looking for the mines, burying fake mines and using the minesweepers to find them, and several of the creative ideas that we introduced into the program, which made it really action-packed.
Yeah, great. And as always, anything like this takes significant money to make it happen. And I know it was a really significant amount of money that was raised to create that village. How did you, in your role, go about inspiring people to give for that?
So that, again, one of those great miraculous God's hand is on this moments. I think our budget, £70,000 sticks in my mind.
Yeah,
I might be a bit adrift on that, but that's the figure that sticks in my mind. And we wrote to our supporters and obviously Vision Cast. And I don't remember us speaking to any particular individuals who were the most significant part of raising that money. I just know that the vision went out there and the money came in, and it came in short measure as well. So again, I think it was of a huge encouragement to us that we raised the money as quickly as we did, and so we're able to go forward really confidently with the build.
It's one of those phrases that I keep hearing of, there's always provision for vision, and often the case that God really comes through, sometimes at the last minute, but in this situation really quite quickly. And that people really responded because there was something really tangible that people could get behind, and that's really exciting. In terms of the development of things, the raising of money, the building of the village, you've mentioned John Mellon already. I've spoken to John a number of times over the years as well. Great guy. Are there any other key individuals that would really stick out in your memory, people that at this moment when we're celebrating all that African Adventure was, people that you'd want us to highlight and say thank you to? So
I think the whole trustee board at the time had great vision for this, because it's a bit left field, isn't it? And when you come to your trustees and say, I want to build an African village, you don't necessarily expect it to land easily, but good on them. They saw the vision, they grasped the vision, they understood it, and they were prepared to run with it. So Eddie Vass was chair of trustees at that time, and we had people like Chris Squires, Terence Cooper, Alan, of course, Alan Fisher, and I've probably forgotten one or two, but those are guys who put lots of effort into their roles, their volunteer roles with CYM in terms of making vision happen. I think on staff at the time we had Ian France, CYM legend that he is, and Ian is the guy who will have a conversation with somebody and empty their wallet by the end of the conversation. So his ability to cast vision through conversation was really, really important for us. And I think then there were key staff. I've mentioned Ben. We had people like Dave Hanna, who we took on to be a part of the program. He'd already got an activities background. People like Rich Blakeglob, who again played an early, very significant role in developing the program, first as a volunteer with us and then later as a staff member. Those names stick out to me. If I've forgotten anyone, I'm sure they'll forgive me. I probably have. Then I think of volunteers like Carol Velikot. Carol was just fantastic because she cooked and she cooked and she cooked. And she always cooked the heartiest of breakfasts for the staff team, which then we always invited the school staff along to the morning breakfast, which was a morning breakfast and prayer time. And innumerable staff came along to that breakfast, whether they were Christians or not, and had some exposure to the gospel as we prayed for their students for the day. And there were lots of tales from them of how impressed they were at the value that we brought to African Adventure of wanting to pray for the success of the program and for their young people. It spoke volumes to them of the care that we had for the young people. This wasn't just a program with a series of boxes to tick to say we'd done that activity. This was actually a significant investment in each young person because we cared for them and loved them.
And that's so good to hear. And constantly the feedback that we have from schools and had in these past few years was always about that relationship element. And you've mentioned that a number of times. It was so key, isn't it? And I think it's what stood African Adventure apart from other similar types of projects, that the relationship came first. And that was so important to all of the staff as well.
And I think for the staff, that just to big up all of the staff who've been a part of it over the years, that was costly. Those staff really had to work hard. It was almost a 24/7 thing for those who were there. You got to African Adventure, and if it was a 3-day program or a 5-day program, you collapsed into your bed every night. And at the end of the session, the end of the residential, you were tired, and you really did need and had deserved your R&R at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we really salute anybody that's volunteered or worked on the program over 15 years, because actually you made it happen, and you went well and truly beyond what you were being asked to do.
Absolutely.
So grateful for that.
Yeah.
Dave, what did it feel like that very first time a school drove up that long driveway at Sizewell? Perhaps a coach came towards you for the very first time. Do you remember it? Do you remember how you felt?
So do I remember it? The honest answer to that is no, because I'm not memory man. Things fade fairly quickly. But I have an overall sense of it. And I think, obviously, first time round, you just don't know how things are going to go. We knew we had a friendly school coming in. It was Kyson School. And the headmistress at the time was Libby Brown, who I knew well personally, and who was a great champion of CYM. So it was a friendly school that came, and they absolutely loved it and gave us great feedback, constructive criticism where it was helpful. And I think, laid a platform for us of confidence moving forwards.
Yeah.
But we knew when they left, we knew that we had something that schools were going to want, which was really helpful.
I'll make sure you get a copy of this, but we're planning to put together a memory book
Okay.
for an adventure, and Carol Velikot delivered her album to me the other day. It's just phenomenal. Photos from the very first schools, and everything as you'd expect, labeled, and names of staff and students that she's remembered there. Incredible to see. One of the things I saw and I spoke to her about the other day was groups of people coming in and making all sorts of animal noises around the village and around the forest and stuff to really give the children an experience. That sounds like that was just an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Do you have any other particular memory, things that have really stuck with you from the times that you were on the residential team?
So lots, just a couple. One was what always felt like me to be God's hand of confirmation on what we were doing. And this was, I think, the second school. And that had come to us through a personal relationship. I think it's the only school in my memory, and certainly in my time, that had ever come from out of county.
Okay.
The school came from Yorkshire.
Yeah.
By the end of the I think it was 5 days, long way to come for 3. I think they came for 5. The head teacher had become a Christian.
Wow.
Now, she was already on a bit of a journey. It wasn't like we were the only link in the chain, but the experience of African Adventure had been absolutely pivotal for her. And again, it was the love and care expressed to the children, and what she saw in the staff team. So it was like God saying, yes, guys, I am going to bless this, and I am going to use this. So that was wonderful. And then another image that is really clear in my mind, and there are many, many of these, is one day walking across from the campfire on a very dark night, and standing in the middle of a field and just holding hands with a group of children and the teacher and looking up in the sky. And I remember just saying to the class, one of the things that's true in Africa is you see the night sky more clearly. If you're out in the village or out in the bush, there's just no other light and you just see the stars so clearly. So let's just stand and look up at the stars. And what many of the villagers who were here would have believed was that God created all this. And you could almost feel the electricity tingle between the children. And I fleshed that out a little bit. But obviously you're having to take care about what you say and how much you say. But it's those moments when you know God speaks in creation, and you have to trust that the Holy Spirit is doing his work in the lives of each of those young people. And you hope that in years to come, they'll look up there and say, well, one day somebody said to me, God created all of that. And who knows? We don't know, do we? And I think that's the reality of the African Adventure experience. We always had to trust that seeds were being sown and that they would be followed up somewhere in the lives of those children, because we could only say so much and go so far.
That's a beautiful memory. And we've said before to each other, seasons come and seasons go, and 15 years of African Adventure that here or there took place, which is an amazing, amazing achievement. As that season has drawn to a close, and we look at what's next, it's really important that we thank you for, really chasing that vision and that dream, and inspiring trustees to back you and pulling together a staff team to make it happen. And I just really want to acknowledge in this to all of these people watching this video just how important you were for that, Dave, and thank God for you, and thank you for the time and the energy that you put into African Adventure. So really grateful for who you are and all that you've been. Would there be anything else as we draw to a close? Would there be any other abiding memory that you would really want to share with people of African Adventure and what it achieved?
I don't think so, other than perhaps to say that I absolutely know it built the faith of everybody who was involved in it. So whilst we were doing something for children, for all of those who took part, it challenged our faith and built our faith and stretched our imagination. And I think, as I look at the work you're doing today, and the growth of CYM, I think it's about missional imagination, isn't it? Because every generation is different. And my goodness, this generation that you're trying to serve now, there's so much confusion around them that it is so important that there are Christians who are faithfully working and faithfully casting a vision for a flourishing life amongst the young people that you're serving. So keep imagining, keep dreaming, keep doing what you're doing, because it's so crucial.
Thanks, Dan. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure to spend time with you. Thank you for sharing a little bit of the journey and the story of African Adventure. Again, thank you for everything you did to make it happen, and we're really grateful that you've shared with us today.
Thanks so much, Simon. Really good to talk to you.
Miriam, I've heard so many funny stories about African Adventure. What is one of your highlights?
I think my favourite memory is we were doing bridge build and all the children had just built the bridge and we carried it over to the pond and we told all the children to sort of step back from the edge of the water so no one fell in. And you just turn around and a child had just dunked his head into the water, popped up and just went, "Fishes?" It was so hard not to laugh because we weren't trying to encourage him, but it was so funny. It was the best thing.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
So, what was it like being a cook at African Adventure?
I knew my place in the kitchen. Maggie bought me an apron before my first African Adventure saying assistant cook, Chris. And I knew my place from that moment on. But I also have a couple of memories, especially around allergies and vegetarians, and the vegetarian that decided they'd like the chicken nuggets because they preferred that to the vegetarian option.
Yeah.
That wasn't me.
Phil, what was the heart of African Adventure? What made it for you?
Right, well, I think the heart of African Adventure is being able to see children come from lots of different backgrounds and to come here to this wonderful place and to just be free and then to learn about themselves and their attitudes to various activities and challenges. And I remember so many, but very often when we were going off to archery, there was one or two children who were saying how they'd done it before, but there were others who were saying, "I'm no good at this, I can't do this." It was really great to be during the session. That particular child would have a go and perhaps not be very good at the start, and then by learning the technique, suddenly it just happened. And they started hitting the board, hitting the target, and really feeling that they've achieved something, and the beam on their face. So I remember quite a lot of children who couldn't hit the target, and then in their last go would hit the gold, and it was absolutely amazing and thrilling. And I find too that working together as a team, we did lots of team building games, and on the low ropes, where children had to get across a space using one rope or two, or even no ropes, to actually see how the children would encourage each other and help each other, hold out a hand and really support each other. And that was good. And then sometimes in the evenings we'd talk about it and say, would anyone like to share how somebody has helped them today? And it really brought out that team spirit, and also seeing that we can achieve, we can do things. That was great.
So Lauren, what was your favourite memory of African Adventure?
So my memories of African Adventure are a bit different because obviously we entered into a time of COVID, but my biggest memory will be just how quickly I was able to gel into the team. Yeah. A lot of people will remember me for bossing Josh about in the office and making sure that he was in his place.
Terrible.
But that was it was a huge comfort to know that despite not getting to meet everybody and do a full African adventure week as it was. But yeah, I was able to be fully immersed into the team in such a short amount of time.
That's great.
So Maggie, food is a huge part of what makes African Adventure. Have you got any stories to tell about meal times and how they were?
Yeah, I think one of my favourite memories was when one of the children spoke to their teacher and said, "Can you write this down, because my mum won't ever believe that I've eaten this."
That's brilliant.
And Josh, we know that a lot of the team make African Adventure, but there were also huge support from the members of staff that came. What are some of your memories around that?
I was really fortunate for my first 2 or 3 years at African Adventure that I had a really specific role working in schools as a school link worker. And that just gave me a massive opportunity to have that extended relationship with teachers particularly. And yeah, I just always look forward to the same schools coming, and every year we'd always see familiar faces. And even after a break in COVID, picking the phone up to schools and speaking to them, that's like that relationship's never gone away. There's like genuine excitement, even talking to me about like who it is, and they're just really just so interested about what's happening. But I remember one head teacher saying to us once about every time he came to African Adventure, he said it just put a like renewed his positive perspective on life. And I remember Paul saying that one of the managers at Sizewell about a teacher sitting in the lounge on their own, I think doing reports, and Paul was chatting to them, and they were saying, "This is my first time to African Adventure, and I didn't really want to come. I was made to be here because someone else dropped out." And they said, like, "I'm really pleased I've come. I feel really at home, really comfortable, and I can't wait to come back next year." Wow. So when teachers said that they're like fighting to come on staff is I think it's just really unique for us about the whole experience they had. So yeah, teachers were great. Yeah. Mag and Chris, as volunteers, what was it like being part of the team at African Adventure?
Well, I have to say that I've been cooking for African Adventure for quite a long time, and I felt accepted as soon as I came in. They've always been good. Communication has always been a bit of a issue about timing of meals, but apart from that, it's been great and just really feeling part of the team.
Was that directed at me?
Might have been.
For me, I just loved the banter and the way that everybody made me feel part of the team. And the way that we all pulled together when there was a crisis. I remember a time when Kimberly had to go home and we were short-staffed. But yeah, everybody just pulled together and came through on top.
As always, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes to make African Adventure what it is. Simon spoke with some of our admin and finance team who were able to share some of their favourite memories as well as the processes involved in making African Adventure happen. As always, we could only speak to a couple members of the team, but there were so many more people that made it happen.
Well, here we are with some of the admin angels from CYM over recent years, particularly in the time that I've been privileged to work with the charity. We've got Jean and Andy and Carol, who are all really amazing people and special people who've worked for us in various different things, but particularly on the African Adventure project in terms of admin and finance and things like that. So we just wanted to have a quick chat and perhaps share some memories and also give you a bit of an insight into what went on in the background in the CYM office to get us to a point where each school could visit and could come along and take part in the activities that we were able to provide. So it's really good to welcome you. Thank you for coming, guys. I really appreciate it. I also want to acknowledge there's some other faces that we would have loved to have had with us this morning. And in typical fashion, it's difficult to get everybody together on the same date. But I was thinking of people like Ian and Janet and Heather and Rosemary and Anne and loads of other people who've helped us along the way with admin and finance, particularly for African Adventure. So we say a huge thank you to those people as well. We're sorry they can't be on this call today, but it's great to have these three wonderful people with us. So welcome, guys. Please do just chip in when you feel like it. But I'm going to throw some questions at you and let's see where this conversation goes. And one of those first things is when we're talking about admin and finance, perhaps, Carol, I could come to you first. What were some of the essential things that we had to do to make sure that a school visit could happen?
We had to get them on board to start with a brochure, and we had some fantastic brochures, very much with the African flavour to them. And then there was all the booking forms, and they always got more and more complicated because we had the child protection issues, and we had all sorts of communications trying to get the information out. There was the invoices and the chasing of the payments, lots and lots of phone calls. And then there was the lists and the rotas and all the activity sheets as well. And they were quite specific. We had the activities and who was leading them, and of course all the items of equipment that they needed, and which group was going to be doing the activity at what time.
I remember how much effort there was in the pre-season planning. So for each year, you sort of knew which schools were coming. You were praying for 3 and hoping 4 and 5 would come as well. And then madly screaming in the background, going, how are we going to squeeze them in? Because you'd have to sit there with that. I remember that 2-year calendar up on the, and you're trying to squeeze them in, and you've got to, you'd love to say yes to one, but you couldn't say yes to both. So I remember that little anguish going on in the background. You know, which school does God want? And that was right at the beginning, before the season had taken off. And
yeah, you're right.
It's amazing how God blessed that every single year. Like, I just remember how faithful God was just on a calendar. You know, something like that. That was great.
Yeah, and that's a really good memory, isn't it? You know, constantly working on a 2 to 3 year plan with an adventure of some schools, of course, came every other year, so that made it a little bit easier to book them into a 2-year cycle. But then hearing you guys on the phone negotiating with schools, trying to work out which date is possible, which isn't, and some of those awkward conversations sometimes with schools of, we're really sorry, but that, you know, your normal date has gone. It's all of those sorts of things that go on that perhaps people wouldn't have been aware of. Were there any real joys in doing this type of role? I mean, Carol and Jean, you've both done this as volunteers. Andy and I have been fortunate to be on the paid team along the way as well. But what were some of the joys of communicating with schools and getting us to a point where schools could visit us?
It was always lovely getting the feedback from the schools. The compliments that came tumbling out. That was great.
Yes. We usually got a gift of money from the schools because they had collected from the children for the water filters for Samaritan's Purse. And I used to love writing to Samaritan's Purse and saying, this school has, you know, contributed so much, and would you be kind enough just to send them a thank you letter? And that was so much appreciated by the schools and Samaritan's Purse, obviously, of course.
Yeah. That's been one of the lovely parts of the project, hasn't it? That perhaps sets it aside from other similar types of activity places, is that there's been a real heart to support other charitable activity as well. The Samaritan's Purse for years and years with their water filters. In recent years, we also supported alongside that a little bit of Hope and their work in Uganda. That's a great memory, Jean, because that's been really important to be able to sow into other work with children and young people elsewhere in the world as well.
A highlight as well was when you were on the week with the teacher, stood next to the teacher, and the kids were either building a shelter, or they were on the low ropes, or they were at that, you know, doing the mine sweeping around the huts, and I remember the joy, like it was like a real quality time between teacher and pupil, and that was a feedback from a lot of the teachers, is going, this is amazing time with my, and you know, the quiet pupil would have time with the teacher, stuff that wouldn't normally happen during the pupils week. That interaction was just available to, that time.
Yeah,
And I remember that being a constant feedback from teachers going, this is cool, this is such an amazing space. Apart from the sleeping, they could have all done with 5-star treatment, some of those teachers.
Yeah, it was a great time for building up relationships that would not normally have occurred in the classroom, I feel.
And it was just lovely when they sat around the fire and the children were encouraged to say something good about another child.
Mm-hmm.
And the compliments that came out and things that they were surprised about other people in their class could do or had done during that week.
Mm.
And I've found, because some of the schools I've seen in subsequent years and the pupils, and people have come up and said, oh, African Adventure, that was so brilliant.
Mm.
And it's made a lasting memory.
Yes.
People 16 years on are talking about it still.
Yeah. The other standout thing was how much, I can just think of names now, they're washing through my head, all the volunteers. So these are the young volunteers who found that space, whether it's Sizewell and God's blessed a little sanctuary like that, because we're prepared to work for him in that green space. I don't know what it is, but they're meeting with not just the pupils, not with the teachers, but with God in that space was amazing. How they grew in confidence on archery. Just think of the two lads, the brothers, how they enjoyed that space, teaching children how to just shoot an arrow at the board, and the quality time those leaders would spend just at a crazy breakfast when they've woken up. They don't even know their own name. They're so tired from the day before. And it's God blesses them in that moment. I've got amazing highlight in my head, which is those cooks, those chefs, the people ordering all that food.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. We literally couldn't have done any of that without, Jean and Carol, you'll remember all of those names. There's just, those volunteers made it happen. Without that kitchen ticking over the way it did, it's just, it would have been undeliverable.
Yeah.
And it was so lovely because some people came when they left school to help on the team or in the kitchen, and then they came post uni, and then subsequently in their life they might find they were free for a week and they'd come again.
Yeah.
And I think it's just been such a great place for people to build character and leadership skills.
Yeah.
Because some of those African adventure leaders were hardly past 20, and they had all that responsibility and energy and enthusiasm for it. It was brilliant, and all the creative African things that they brought to the project. It meant new lists and new rotas and all the rest, but hey, wasn't it wonderful?
Yeah, that's great. Going back to sitting in the office and doing some of that admin stuff, let's be honest, what were some of the frustrations? What were some of the difficulties that we've encountered over those years? Andy?
I think we highlighted in the beginning, just you have to be really strategic, as you say, on sometimes maybe even a longer than a 3-year plan at getting your schools organized. And they work well under an organized system. So their world is so structured. We as CYM or we as volunteers needed that long look on it. Secondly, then those volunteers needed a clear roadmap. Their lives are so busy. Their worlds are crazier than ours, and yet they volunteer. It's amazing, isn't it? And they, I think, if you've got your 3-year roadmap, then fulfilling a full volunteer for a specific week, that gives you many prayers.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
And we had lots of prayer times. It was great being in the office and start the day with prayer. And God was very much blessing us, but we were so dependent on him because we had, as Andy says, horrendous lack of volunteers sometimes, and we wondered how we could possibly operate.
Yeah.
And we knew we had to somehow.
Yes.
Please God, please God.
Yeah. I think the last season that we were running, so not last year, but the year before, there was, I think it was a Tuesday evening where I'd been rotated on to be there, and I didn't stay with the project on a huge level. I usually visited, but I'd been there on team with Josh, and he was leading that week, and we sat in the dining room at 11:30 that night, and we looked at each other and we just said, we don't think we have the people we need to run tomorrow. We'd had a number of people fall ill, and we'd had a couple of volunteers call off at the last minute, and we just said, what on earth do we do? And thankfully, we were both wise enough to say, well, we probably just need to pray, don't we? And we sat and we prayed, and then we both frantically went through our mobile phones and called in as many favours as we could. We got delivered. The people turned up the next morning. You know, we didn't have to send the school home. They still had a great time.
Yeah.
That's been one of my overarching memories of it, that God has just delivered time and time again when we needed. So in terms of finance, Andy, and you had a real hand in that in your time with us, you know, we're going to talk with Dave about how did we go about raising the money to build the village and things like that. But on the day-to-day and the keeping the project running, actually African Adventure was something that we made a little bit of money from. It really helped CYM. How did that look from your perspective in terms of looking after accounts and finances?
So as long as we were organised in advance, it meant that the schools could organise their finance. So it's another part. Organisation is key here, and that meant that the funds would flow through, because ultimately you were asking parents to pay, and you know you need to key parents. You know, so the whole chain needs really good line of communication. So you know, without Jean and Carol, it's just, you know, these things are impossible. And the project literally couldn't, Simon knows, other folk will know, John Millen knows how much it costs to thatch a roof. You know, it's more than 5,000, and to put shingles on instead of thatch saved a little bit of money, and to get folk to volunteer. Phil Sharples volunteered his entire life putting bark down and painting this, and it's just, you know, without huge generosity from individuals, we may have made a little bit of money on the you know, from the children's parents paying for this amazing experience, but the costs behind the scenes, if you stack it all up, it was marginal. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
And I think a great thanks, especially in the early days, to the managers at Sizewell Hall, Paul Golding and Pete Warnock. They were amazing. They helped in so many ways, and yeah, there was frequent visits to Cooper's, the hardware store, and just there's sort of time and energy and prayers for everything.
Yeah, that's really
great.
Pete, Rob, people like that were the time they would put in behind the scenes on ordering the food in to make sure it was just what had been popped on the list. The food ordering list, I mean, you know, that there's some saints, name them for me, please, Lord. You know, is that's those skills are required. You know, these all these surrounding skills that are absolutely essential.
I mean, certainly in these last 7-8 years, Andy, Dawn Farr is the person who's just managed that amazingly for us. Again, a volunteer who just puts so much time into making sure that food arrives, the right things arrive. And as you all know, when those dietary sheets were coming in, when they would change, and when somebody would then go, oh, and I forgot to tell you that this person is this, Dawn was unflappable with that stuff, and would just be so creative. At site as well, as would all of the cooks. I mean, the cooks just were phenomenal in working around what was put in front of them each week.
We were blessed by Sizewell Hall as a venue. That facility is amazing. The fact that God was so entwined in its DNA, in its staff's DNA, meant that anybody crossing that threshold was immediately blessed. But the facility itself, you know, the kitchen was amazing, and even the camp kitchen was adequate and just enough. And it serves other things like the Suffolk Christian camps and, you know, things like that ongoing. So facilities are, you know, were key to the success as well.
Yeah, great. We're going to come into a final question in a moment. I mean, a couple of weeks ago or so, Carol dropped a photo album into me at the office, and I've just been blown away, Carol, just how you've catalogued African adventure there over so many years. It's such a beautiful thing to be looking at. So I just want to mention in this video that we're really hoping to put together an African adventure memory book, something that we will keep that really showcases what the project did, but also hopefully create something that if volunteers out there want to buy a copy, then they can. And have a lasting copy for themselves. But this is going to be jam-packed with Carol's photos because they're just amazing. And the dates and the names and the things that Carol's kept a record of. Photos of the very first school visiting. That was just such a beautiful thing for me to sit and flick through the other day. So thank you for that, Carol. Perhaps I'll start with you. What would be, if you can name one or two, your lasting memories of African adventure?
Probably campfires and the African guys that came from the Congo. They told their stories. They made these incredible animal sounds and they threw their voices, so it sounded as if the whole area around the campfire was filled with leopards and tigers and all sorts of scary animals. And they explained their custom of putting out the food and taught the children drumming skills, and they just were brilliant.
Yeah,
I think a lasting memory will be reading the children's comments of how much they'd enjoyed the week and what it had meant to them.
Yeah.
My regret over all this was that I never actually went to the site when there was a school there to see what actually went on. But obviously from the comments that the children had written, it was just amazing. They'd had such a wonderful time.
Yeah. Mine are twofold. I love folk like John Mellon, who poured their heart into, I'll let that phone go. I'll keep going. You know, John built a school in Africa, and then he came and he took what he knew God was alive out in Africa, and he built a village on paper, you know, and saw it, you know, and many other folk were involved in that. And there were Ian and Dave Pepper will tell you about how folk poured their financial funding to make that village happen, because they captured what a godly man had put on paper, you know. And so it's amazing if we think of an amazing gift to Suffolk, and we're prepared to dig the ground and put it on paper and pray about it, and put our finances toward it. That's an abiding memory, and I love some of those individuals dearly involved in that project. Still, they care more about people's souls than they care about that patch of ground. And God washes through that ground, hence will do for millennia, because he's got his hand on it. And so they weren't afraid to dig ground. Come on, people, let's not be afraid. You know, that's a great memory. And then I loved the pack down. You know, when you're so knackered after having done 5 days or the third, you know, and I don't know what it is, but God goes, right, I'm going to bless you just with peace. It could be that simple. You are so knackered, you can't receive anything else but peace. And I love that. So that was walking in those CYM doors after a week. And Kirsty can barely keep herself upright. And I don't know, that space, that prayer on a Monday morning, when you know you've done a good work has happened. And those children, we may never meet again, but we've created that handshake. We've said, God, here's this child of yours. And that's as simple as the transaction was. And God blesses that.
That's amazing. What a way to finish our conversation. I want to say thank you to you three. Just You're incredibly humble, all of you. As we prepared for this, you all said, I don't know that we've got much to contribute, etc., etc. But you've shared some wonderful memories, and they will really help us remember and honour African Adventure and all that's happened in that place. We say the same to anybody else that's helped with admin and finance and volunteering along the way, that we love you so much and we're so grateful for you. But it's been great to share with you. Thank you for taking the time to do this today. We really appreciate what you've shared with us.
We're now going to listen to a conversation that Lucy's had with some of the paid members of staff here at African Adventure.
Okay, good evening everyone. My name is Lucy and I'm really excited to be here this evening with a bunch of people who have been employed or really heavily involved in African Adventure over the last 10 plus years. As part of our celebration of African Adventure, we just wanted to try and gather a few people, share some memories, and just really acknowledge and talk through some of the impact that African Adventure has had on children in our local area, but also on volunteers and on staff and school staff and beyond that as well. Before I start chatting things through, I just wanted to acknowledge a few people that have been really significant within this time, and if you're looking and you might be thinking, hang on, there's a face or two missing there. So Dave Hanna and Ben Whale are two really key names within that who were unable to join us this evening, but we know had a huge impact on and worked really hard in getting the project off the ground and building those links with schools in the beginning. And then Becca Wilding as well was coordinator of the project from around 2013, but has just had a baby, so is unable to join us this evening as well. But those people and more have been really key to the work over the past few years. So my first one for you guys is there a lasting memory? It might be hard to get it down to just one, but is there a lasting memory of African Adventure that you'd like to share with us?
100% is one memory that always sticks out, and it was from the week where Chris Seeger was handing over to me actually, and we had a boy come along who just would not join in with anything, and I asked the teachers what was the matter, and they said, oh, he's like this at school, all of his paintings are black, everything he does is hard, because he lived with his dad till he was like 5 or 6 and then moved to live with his mum who didn't know, and life was really difficult. And over the course of the week, he properly came out of his shell, he got to know all of the other kids, and on the last day, he was running around playing football with them. And standing next to the teachers, they were like, this is the first time we've ever seen him actually engage with the class. And it was such an amazing moment. And it was so inspiring because it was one of my first weeks there. So thank you to Chris for running that week and showing me what was possible. Yeah. But it was amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome. Kimberly?
Yeah, I've got loads. Some unshareable because they involve poo or some other body. But yeah, another similar situation. We had one school come, and one of the children they were bringing along had got additional needs, and they basically said, you know, he probably won't join in. He'll probably be quite separate to the group. It might be that he comes up for the afternoon and we just don't see him for the rest of the week. And he enjoyed himself so much that he kept coming back each day, and he wasn't able to stay, but he kept coming back. And it's similarly, they just said that the look on his face, just kind of with the freedom that he's got on the site, and it was just really, really special. And there are various weeks where the teachers have kind of said, oh, you know, be careful of this person, or expecting, you know, potentially some challenging behaviour from this person, or whatever it might be, or and just seeing those children really come alive who perhaps don't necessarily thrive in a formal classroom environment all the time. Just to hear the teachers talk about them was, yeah, amazing.
I was going to say mine kind of goes along with that, and I'm going to choose 2, maybe 3, was like, which relates with that, of just hearing teachers constantly say about the opportunity for teachers to see their pupils differently outside the classroom, to see kids that perhaps aren't so academic suddenly taking the lead in things like the pipeline of water, and suddenly they showed leadership qualities which the teachers had never seen before. And so it was both the ability to see kids suddenly step in
but it was very good fun.
Richard.
I worked with what I was given. I mean, in all seriousness, that's kind of how it was, because I came down on a placement initially, and so my first introduction to African Adventure was a boys' weekend, the first weekend to test out the village, and then a week later, so we had that weekend, and then like a week passes, and on the Friday, I sat down in the CYM office with Dave Pepper, Dave Hannah, and Ben Whale, and they go through what the plan is for the week and each activity. And it's like, we're opening on Monday, we've got our first school coming. And they got to the session that's the final session of, you're going to make a water filter. And I said, oh, what sort of water filter? Because I may have had some background in that. And they went, oh, we don't know yet, just some sand in a bucket. And I was suddenly given the task in a town I didn't know between Friday lunchtime and Wednesday morning, because the first school was doing Monday to Wednesday and then the other half Wednesday to Friday, to come up with a session so you could build a water filter. And that then ran, I assume it ran until the end of time. My lasting one though of young people, we took school years 4, 5 and 6, and we took some children from young people from a high school, and they were the kids that were kind of struggled to settle in school. It was the hardest week I think anyone that was involved with it did, because it was like, okay, all of the normal rules have gone out the window, we've got to be creative and come up with things. And it included the teachers sending one of the children home at like, their parents had to come at about midnight on the first night to pick them up. We had all the attitude that you can imagine. And then I remember on the final day, as they were getting back on the bus to go home, the entire coach was crying, and they were just like, we don't want to leave, it's been so good. And it was the turnaround in these young people that were so often kind of written off, and suddenly actually seeing how by investing just a week in them, and putting some fairly firm boundaries in at time, watch them grow to a point where they were like, I remember someone said they said something like they felt like they'd been part of a proper family for the first time or something like that. And it was like, oh my goodness. And all the staff and volunteers stood on the side go, we're not crying. No, it's all good.
Yeah, thank you.
I think one of the lasting memories for me is just the sense of unity from the whole team, the team on site, the staff, the cooks, the sizable staff as well, and even the rest of the CYM team who weren't even there. You just felt that they were with you in spirit, and they were just such a great team ethic. And I think that we were just showing God's love to the school staff and the children, and we were just passing that on almost. And it was great to see them grow and show that love to each other as well, and to their fellow pupils, and just watching them grow throughout the week, I think was just incredible. And no matter how many times you see it, you just never get bored of it. So
it was a team like no other, given like the hours we spent there. Like we all worked like 14-15 hour days with probably no breaks, because you're serving the food and you're doing the activities, and but you're right, I've never worked in a team dynamic where everyone has been so on board, and where there doesn't feel like there's loads of sniping or backstabbing. It's like, no, we're all in this together, and we're all here, like you said, Robbie, to serve and to show love to the kids and to the staff. It's incredible.
And we, I laugh about saying, we worked with what we were given, but actually one of the joys was seeing the gap year grow, and the fact that at the end of a gap year, being able to hand over to one of the gap years was a real privilege, that you kind of go, I've seen, it wasn't just the students that came and the pupils that came, it was actually, some of you guys.
There's a sense of leaving legacy, wasn't there, about African Adventure? Leaving the legacy in the young people that came, a legacy in in the teachers that we engaged with, in the whole narrative of the whole African adventure, you know, the legacy of getting people to engage with that narrative, but also, yeah, the number of leaders and young leaders, and, you know, each of us that grew through that. Yeah, incredible.
I think it was amazing because we had such an eclectic team. You know, the volunteers that came were all so different, and there was space for everybody to really be themselves. So you'd have some cooks who'd be like, "Oh, I'm going to go berry picking and make homemade jam and bake fresh bread every morning," and others who were really good at pretending to be ill and running to the hospital, the toilet, and being sick when they were meant to have all these crazy African diseases. And there was so much fun, and there was so much wisdom there. You know, I remember if I was ever stressed, the best place to go was the kitchen, because there you'd meet the volunteers who've been working there for years and years and years, who've been involved in so many projects, who are committed to it, and they would just be like, "You're fine. We'll pray. You'll be fine. God's there." And it was such a blessing to have that.
It was. I used to love as well. There was a little sense of competition between certain people that came to cook. That if one did something one week, like, I'm going to do roast dinner because I can, then one of the other cooks another week would be like, "What? They did a roast dinner?" And the next time they come, they'd be trying to go, "I'm going to try and roast it. I can do that." But there was always a cheer from staff when Asda Man came.
Yes. Those are the best cookies ever.
Fresh baked cookies just churned out all the time. Sorry if you didn't get Asda Man.
Yeah, a couple of things. Like, I think a few times certain kids who had particularly rough backgrounds, just the sense of peace that they would just say is, "Oh, I had a really good night's sleep for the first time in months," and it would just be that environment that allowed for that to happen. Yeah, that was one of them. And then again, just the relationships we managed to build with some of the teachers as well that came year after year, and yeah, some right characters there that made a lasting impression. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one for me would have been, this might have been with you, Robbie, maybe. We had a child come one week and his teacher said, "Oh, he just never smiles. Even if we ask him to smile for a photo, it's like he doesn't know how. He never smiles." It was from quite a big family, and it was just like nobody had ever laughed with him or smiled with him, and just the concept of that was heartbreaking to me. But again, a bit like that child you were talking about, Kirsty, at the beginning, he just slowly started to open up, and you go, "Oh, there's a bit of person. Oh, there you are. Okay, you're in there." Yeah. And then by the end of the week, I remember taking that group photo on the Sizewell steps, and he's grinning absolutely ear to ear. And just that process of him coming out of his shell and showing there really was a real personality in there. Of course there was, and it was like no one had ever really been able to draw that out. But African Adventure and the site and just the love and the time and the different environment had that amazing impact on him. And I'm sure all of us probably have countless stories of children like that, where we just saw that slow transformation through the week. And that is the power of African Adventure. Was, well, you know, we know who the power of African Adventure was. That's God, isn't it? But it was just amazing. Okay, I'll go on to our next one. So the next one is what impact did African Adventure have on you personally?
I think for me personally, it was massive. I think I was teaching before I started off coordinating at African Adventure, but before that I'd done the gap year, and African Adventure really helped kind of grow my confidence and helped me decide that actually, yeah, working with children was something that I was really passionate about. And so in that sense, it kind of helped direct my kind of next steps really in terms of my career. And I went into teaching and found the first couple of years really challenging, and then went into the coordinator role, and actually it really just allowed me space and time to kind of discover who I was and what I was good at. And I think I'd got to a kind of place where I just felt like I wasn't really good at anything, and that role just allowed me to, and just CYM in general just allowed me to just kind of figure out what my strengths were, and actually to really challenge those thoughts that I was kind of having about, you know, not being good enough, or, you know, whatever it may have been. Actually, I felt like I really grew in loads of different ways. But yeah, I just learned so much. I just feel like you could do a season at African Adventure and you would learn so much more than you would in a year in any other job. Um, yeah, I can't, yeah, put it into words really how kind of much it's impacted me as a person. So yeah, it's been an amazingly valuable experience to me personally, definitely.
Thank you.
I think very much like Kimini, it taught me a great deal. I remember starting the gap year in obviously African Adventure and in a position of, well, I don't really know where I'm going with my life because I'm just working in a factory and I've not really got any direction. And actually it showed me something that I was actually quite good at that I'd never ever considered, because the idea of working with other people's children did not appeal to me to start with. And then actually it grew on me and showed me that I've actually got some skills here and I can do this kind of job. And it kind of taught me how to, one of the things especially, relate to teachers, which I'm doing quite a lot now in my job, is going into schools and working with teachers and actually know how to converse with them and what you need to be able to give to them in order to get something back. And that sort of skill base, I think was really crucial. And it also taught me that actually I can do a lot more than I think I can, and I can sort of withstand a lot more than I think I can, because it's like Rich said, it's a hard job to do. And Emily, I think you said you're doing ridiculously long days, and when you're doing week after week after week, it becomes incredibly hard. And for me, having a long distance relationship at the same time, that was a real challenge, because I'd be so tired at the weekend that I just wanted to sleep, but then I also wanted to be part of my relationship, so keeping that going. And yeah, it just showed that I can withstand a lot more, and it showed me a lot about who I am as a person, I think. And just the skills it gave me, and the memories as well. And some of those activities, like the herding game, I've been able to bring out in my current role as a youth worker, and the kids love it. And it's just all of that collective knowledge that you've learned together and how it can be applied elsewhere and into any situation is just an amazing gift to have taken away from a job, I think, really.
I think there's something really special about, and I think it emulates God's kingdom a little bit of African Adventure, of that when you give of yourself to that extent, when you pour yourself into that, actually you get so much back out that actually you're grown through it. It wasn't easy. They were long days, and you're doing everything from putting your hand down a toilet to leading a session to serving food through to doing the washing up. You're doing all the jobs, and you gave of yourself, but God gives to you back. And I think that's a really special thing to be part of. Yeah, and a great life lesson to remember, that when you pour yourself into something, God strengthens you and builds you in that.
I was just going to say, just hearing you say that, it makes me think actually it taught me a lot about like being in a family, because it does become a family and a community, and you get so close knit and you get to know people really well, and you sort of learn how to be vulnerable with other people. And I think perhaps that's something that I learned the most from, was actually it's midnight, you're in the huts, it's a thunderstorm, somebody's weeding their sleeping bag, and you just have to band together and get stuff done. And the conversations you have and the way that it brings people together, brings team together, brings again, is just another, like you say, reflection of God's kingdom, and actually how when we were working for one purpose, it just works. And exactly as Kirsty said, there's so many times when you think, how is this working? But it just does, and it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, the thing I would add into all of those things is, I guess, that going back to watching people grow, and the fact that we had this diverse team of volunteers, and the volunteers were, some people kind of going, just come out of A-levels, don't know what to do. Some were people who were retired that were giving time because they then had it, and kind of this whole range in between. But there was, although some of us had the title of coordinator, it never felt like a hierarchical kind of thing. Everybody, like, it didn't matter. You could have been the volunteer, you could have been a member of staff, you could have been the coordinator, whatever. If the toilet needed cleaning out, you were cleaning it out. If someone was needed to lead a session, you were going to go and lead a session, and everyone got an opportunity. And I think one of the things that I really valued from it, and continue to kind of take away, is that valuing of people at whatever apparent level they are within an organization or within a group or within the church. Actually, everybody has a really important role to play, and they bring value to what we're doing. And that just played out day after day after day at African Adventure, in season and out of season, when everyone would say, "So what do you do in the winter then?" You'd go, "Well," and people, you know, I remember standing in the pond with Phil Brown as the snow came down, clearing out weed and sorting it out, because that's what needed doing. And people just mucked in everywhere, and it was great.
I think alongside that, there was the learning of risk. So, you know, as a leader with gap years, learning to risk a little, to let them lead it and make mistakes. And often we're really frightened of that, particularly in a formalized setting where you might have a school there, to let a gap year student lead it, and maybe not lead it as well as you, but it's okay because they're on the journey. That was just really important. That's a really intrinsic part of African Adventure and of CYM as the gap year experience, and the teachers knew that. But actually, as a leader, to learn to trust in that risk process is really important as well.
I love that you said that, because I was someone that was on the receiving end of that, and in being allowed to do that and make those mistakes, I just absolutely fell in love with African Adventure and working in that way with children, and that was the start of a really long journey with CYM for me. So I went away to uni, came back and worked my way through different parts of the organisation, and I think that African Adventure was a really big key part of that for me, and just absolutely formational in my leadership and my personal development as well. So I am forever grateful to the project and to many, many leaders and team members that I worked alongside. I'm going to wrap us up really quickly because we're about to run out of time, but I just want to say thank you so much to all of you for being a part of this, and thank you to any supporters who are watching us. It's a real shame we couldn't do this together in person, although I think potentially doing it on Zoom has meant we've been able to gather more of us anyway. But yeah, just it's great to be able to just acknowledge and thank African Adventure and God for everything that he did through that. And as a charity, as CYM, we are so excited for what we know is coming next.
One of our highlights is spending time around the campfire. So we wanted to do that in our own special way by doing some sung worship.
We just want to say a massive thank you to the guys at Hope that came and led our campfire worship for us.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Yes, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are here, stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working.
God who makes the giants fall, up and down the walls of Jericho. You're the God who makes the miracle. We believe. You're the God who parts the oceans wide, just to bring us closer to your side. You're the God who brings the dead to life. We believe. God, how great you are. Great things you have done. From everything we've seen, there is more. know you never make mistakes. God, you fill us with a greater faith. We believe, oh, we believe. Oh God, how great you are. Great things you have done. For everything we see, there is more to come. Every victory, every battle won. For everything we see, there is more to come. There is more to come. Oh, there is more to come. There is more to come. So much more. All of our hoping, all of our trusting, all of our future in the God who never fails. All of our faith in, all of our trust in, all of our future in the God who never fails. All of our hope in, all of our trust in, all of our future in the God who never fails. All of our faith in, all of our strength in, all of our future in the God who never fails. God, how great you are. Great things you have done. For everything we see, there is more to come. Every victory, every battle won. For everything we see, there is more to come. There is more to come. There is more to come. So much more to come. Sing, we are confident in all your ways, 'cause we know you never make mistakes. God, you fill us with a greater faith. We believe we are loved. We are confident in all your ways, 'cause we know you never make mistakes. God, you fill us with a greater faith. We believe. God, how great you are. Great things you have done. For everything we see, there is more to come. Every victory, every battle won. For everything we see, there is more to come.
really pleased to introduce David to us, who's going to share a thought with us now.
I'm glad I've been given the opportunity to share a few thoughts on my experience of African adventure and the times that I was able to come up to Leiston and be part of the team there. I'm only sorry that I couldn't have been there for the final evening and share together with you all. But it was a great privilege to be invited to be part of the team on occasions, to share some stories and experiences that I'd had during my time in Africa. I try to place myself there now this afternoon, and as I do so, the memories of the children running around, squealing and shouting and having fun and talking together, and just enjoying the atmosphere that Sizewell Hall gave them to spend time together as pupils and as a school. And for many of them, it would have been their first time away from home, and so a great responsibility for the team that shared with them. I watched as they learnt new skills, as they took part in activities, as they learnt much about what it would be like to live in an African village, to face up to some of the things that children have to face in their daily lives, the journeys that they make to school and the way that they have to eat their food. And it was good to watch them as they learnt those skills, and they learnt much of what they could learn about other cultures in those surroundings. I marvelled at the patience of the staff members of the teams as they taught them with the skills that they had, and as they cared for them and loved those children and the staff members, right from those who taught activities, who shared in the cooking of the meals, and every part of the team who meant so much and made it such a wonderful time for the children to be there. They gave of themselves to ensure that the programme worked well, sometimes in the most difficult of circumstances, but no one let it get them down, and they continued to do their best and to show, not necessarily by words, but by their living Jesus to those young people. And I praise God and I thank God that over the years, hundreds of children and staff members have visited Sizewell Hall as part of the African Adventure programme and have gained so much of it. And God has used that programme, and God has blessed it in ways perhaps that couldn't even have been imagined at the beginning when it was first suggested and built upon. And so I thank God that he takes what has been offered in his name and he uses it in tremendous ways to reach out to young people. When I spent half a day with members of the CYM team and trustees in prayer, we were invited to pick up a card. And I picked up a card that showed a pathway. On both sides of the path were flourishing trees and beautiful surroundings. And that path went through those trees and then ended. And during those prayer times, it reminded me that what had happened and what was being done at the moment through African Adventure was all good, and God had taken it and planted it and helped it to see it grow. But the path went further, and I believe in these days that the path goes further, that we don't see what's beyond the horizon, but that God still has a plan and a purpose for African Adventure in whatever way that may be in the future, and that God will use that work in a tremendous way to reach out to young people and to help them to discover how life is for other people and to be grateful for what they have in their own lives. So thank you, God, for what you've done through African Adventure. Thank you for every member of staff, whatever part they played in working with those young children and sharing their lives with those young people. And I pray that God will continue to use the future plans, whatever they may be, and that the work will go on and grow and develop in ways we can't even begin to imagine yet. Thank you for all that you've done, and we look forward to working together and seeing what God has for us in the future. God bless African Adventure. God bless the CYM ministries, or whatever those ministries may be. Amen.
This evening has been about celebrating all that has happened over 15 years of African Adventure. It's been a huge privilege for CYM to serve our local schools through this wonderful project at this beautiful site. And we don't take for granted the opportunities that have come our way. We see lots of our work as sowing seeds, sharing Jesus with children, young people and the staff that work with them through our actions and our behaviours, and then trusting that God works through us and them. African Adventure was a wonderful vehicle for that. From those very early ideas and dreams that Dave had, through to the building of this village and this campfire, lots of different staff responsible for running the visits, and the thousands of children and staff who have visited, we're grateful. Grateful for the opportunity to share in those people's lives. Grateful for the moments where we've built relationships, and grateful to God for placing us here in this season. Seasons do come and go, and this season has drawn to a close. Yes, we can be sad about that, but as you've seen in this video, our hope is that the lasting memories of African Adventure will be ones of hope, laughter, joy and excitement. We hope and pray that children will have seen and experienced something different, something special in their time here. They are the things that I will take from my visits to this project over many years. I want to say a particular thank you to Sizewell Hall for how they have hosted us over these 15 or so years. Thank you to the managers and the trustees for trusting us to run this project and running with that initial vision. We will miss you and this site, but we trust that God has wonderful plans for you here. We've faced massive challenges in this global pandemic. But if there is one thing that I think God has been saying to CYM clearly, it is that a new, exciting season is ahead. You'll hear many people talking about problems, concerns and worries, understandably. However, we are having the faith that amazing things are yet to come for our work. We enter a new season with hope and optimism, and I invite you to join us. As we say farewell to African Adventure and this beautiful place, we look ahead with boldness and confidence. And I invite you to join us on Friday the 3rd of September at 7:30 p.m. We will gather in person again, and we will also live stream a supporter gathering. An opportunity to meet in person, to share with each other, and for you to hear firsthand what we think we are being called to do next. You won't want to miss it. Please put that date in your diaries and look out for more details very soon. And I have a final few thanks to the trustees of CYM for being brave and bold when chasing this dream, and also for being brave enough to draw it to a close. To all of the staff who have worked on this project, to every single volunteer who has given up countless hours to be part of this project, and to you, the supporters of CYM, thank you. You made this happen. You have been a huge part of its success. And finally, once more, I say thanks to God for giving us this opportunity over so many years. We praise and we thank you, God, for all that has been accomplished in this place in your name. Thank you for watching. I hope it's helped you to say farewell to this much loved project. And I really look forward to seeing you in person on the 3rd of September.
Right, well, this is the parable of the Lowry. Once in southern Africa, there lived an old man with 3 sons. And one day, the household was running short of firewood. So the man said to the oldest son, Go and gather firewood from the forest, will you? And so off the eldest son went to the forest to collect firewood. Well, it was only after a very short time that the son returned home, and without any firewood. "Why are you home so soon, my son? And why don't you have any firewood?" asked the old man. "Well, when I got to the forest, someone called out to me. 'Go away, go away, go away,' replied the son. 'So I've come home with no firewood.' Well, the father was very upset. He didn't understand what had happened and was disappointed with the actions of his son. So the next day, the father sent the second son out into the forest to gather firewood. The father and his other two sons waited and waited. They waited the whole day for the return of the second son. And then, finally, after the sun had set, the second son arrived home, and he too had no firewood. "Why are you home so late, my son? And why don't you have any firewood?" asked the old man. "Well, father, when I arrived at the forest, I too heard someone call out, 'Go away, go away, go away, go away,' said the son in a hoarse voice. So I replied, 'No, I won't.' But then the voice came again and said, 'Go away, go away, go away.' And I said, 'No, I won't. You can't make me.' And we argued and argued all day until it was almost dark, and I decided to come home. Well, the father was most upset and puzzled about what was happening. The need for firewood was now desperate. So the next day, early in the morning, he sent his youngest son to the forest to gather firewood. And just after noon, the youngest son returned home with a huge load of firewood on his head. The father and his two older sons gathered around as the youngest son lowered the firewood onto the ground in front of the house. They began to question him excitedly. "How did you gather so much firewood and so quickly? Didn't you hear the voice? How did you get permission to enter the forest?" Well, the youngest son replied, "Yes, I heard the voice. It called out to me, 'Go away, go away, go away, away, away,' just as I reached up to the forest. And I looked up to see where the voice came from. Up there, 'Go away, go away, go away.' I saw the go-away bird. It was high up in the tree. So I thought to myself, am I going to obey this bird up in the tree? Or am I going to obey my Father who has sent me and our need for the firewood? So I didn't listen. I just went to the forest, climbed over the fence and collected all this firewood, and there's a lot more. And here it is.